Hello, I'm Norman Robinson, and welcome to NOLA Crime Crisis, a show developed to open the dialogue among city leaders, executives, and local business owners in order to discuss the crime currently plaguing our city. On today's show, we are fortunate enough to welcome Crimestoppers GNO President and CEO, Ms. Darlene Costanza. This is the first time we've had you on Crime Crisis, NOLA.
Yes, it is, and I appreciate being here with you.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Sure. What we like to do normally is set the tone for the discussion we're going to have, and we send our man on the street out to interview, regular citizens about their perception of what's taking place as far as crime is concerned. So, our man on the street, Logan Graffio, went out to sample some opinions. So, let's see what we got.
What's happening at the schools? How much funding is there for, after-school programs, creativity, how to nurture human beings into adolescence and adulthood, and that we're fixated on this, this recent upsurge in crime. I think it's missing the whole point. People want to score political points. I mean, it's institutional.
How do you assess what he's saying?
Well, I think certainly looking at our students, and first off, what they're facing. When we were in school, you weren't surrounded by hearing about school shootings, hearing about kids bringing in weapons on campus. And a weapon back then, if there was something on campus, it certainly wasn't a gun. And I think there's a lot of students who are fearful in the sense that they're fearful that their school isn't prepared for that type of activity. I think that kids are being bullied online, so when you bring in the social media aspect of what kids are facing and having to make decisions and to not choose violence, I mean, that is something that I know as Crimestoppers we've been very engaged in. I mean, we run an anonymous reporting system for schools, actually statewide. Any school can come on board. It's called Safe Schools Louisiana, and it's done free of charge, thanks to the governor. And it gives the kids the opportunity to report things and be preventative when they're seeing things, and we are seeing a change in what they're reporting. I mean, back in the day, it was a lot of, there's going to be a fight today after school, and a fight, it's going to be a small group of kids, and then it's over with. But now you're seeing
not anymore.
Not anymore. Now on social media, you're seeing these kids being challenged by whatever it is, whatever that hate is, or whatever that bullying instance is. It follows them through every aspect of their life. So then it starts to escalate. And that's when we're seeing kids, looking at choosing violence, whether it's a shooting or not.
When I was looking at, over the syllabus for Crimestoppers last night, and one of the things I was thinking, I said, Darlene has been doing this for years, and the first question that popped up in my mind was, how does what's happening now compare or differ from what you've seen previously as it relates to crime? I guess much of it would relate to what you were discussing earlier.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm seeing a difference in, yes, I've been doing this for 29 years now, 28 years, almost 29. And the difference is, back in the day when I first started, we were actually in the city of New Orleans. It was at that peak time of the murder capital, in 94, 95. And when you heard about those crimes, a lot of that, it was retaliatory, or there was a relationship between the shooter and whether it be a neighborhood, quote, gang. We never did say we had really gangs like the Crips.
Yeah, we didn't want to admit that.
We had neighborhood groups that were considered gangs, but there was a relationship between the shooters. And that's changed. Because what we're seeing now is it just seems to be a lot more brazen, in the sense that if somebody's got a beef, they're going in and they don't care who or where, what's around them in in that surrounding, in that environment, and they're going to take care of business. And we've seen that very recently with the women who were shot with children in the car and targeted in the middle of the day in a very busy intersection. There was no regards. So that's changed for sure.
Yeah, I was talking to the former police chief, Warren Riley.
Yes.
And he was saying that there's a lot of talk on the street about exactly what's happening. So you got to be on the street. You have to keep your ears to the pavement, and you'll pick up these conversations about why these women are being shot. They oftentimes are in relationships with people who other people are trying to get to. So if they can't get to the guy they're looking for, they shoot up his family or his girlfriend.
That's right.
And
okay. Now back in the day.
That leaves you speechless.
Absolutely. And back in the day, and you go back, I mean, we're out there talking to a bunch of kids, right? We're always talking to kids and community members saying, you know, get over this no snitch mentality. But if you really go back and look at what a no snitch meant, there was rules. There were guidelines in the sense that you didn't go shoot up somebody's children. You didn't go shoot up the grandmother or the mother. Yeah, and that total disregard of any humanism, I guess, whatever, that's gone. And for us, when we look at our children and we talk to or community members, why would you want to stay silent? Why would you want to protect somebody if they're doing this type of activity? Why would you not speak up anonymously to stop it?
Well, a lot of people don't trust institutions.
Right.
So how do we get past that? I mean, they're saying that, okay, I live in this neighborhood.
Right.
Darlene Costanza lives in a neighborhood that's unlike mine. It's probably safer. She's probably got more resources, and she's probably got law enforcement protecting her back. I don't have that. I'm here, a single mother, and I live in a neighborhood where, you know, things happen all the time. So if I make a phone call, somebody's going to know.
Right.
So how do you penetrate that kind of skepticism and fear?
Right, and that is something, whether that's in a neighborhood like that or in a school side where you've got kids who are like, I'm going to trust an adult, you know. So I think it's the messaging, but I also think we have individuals in those neighborhoods. So we did, years ago, we did a Project Good Samaritan program where we tried to reach all the churches, not just the bigger churches, but the neighborhood churches. And we started with educating the pastors on what we do and explain to them that it truly is a process. It is anonymous, and you know from your years working in the media, we don't give up any information on anyone. That's not our role. You know, we get challenged that, well, you need witnesses. We do need witnesses, but we're not making a witness. We're giving that information, we call it criminal intelligence, to start those cases. So it's the people who are the influences in the neighborhoods. That's who we need to get to. Faith-based is one. Certainly social media. You have so many young people who are really influencers now in their followings. And many of them, like, that's who we've been trying to meet with. And when they talk about doing positive messaging, a message has to be to empower people to speak up. Because for me, I mean, I was a victim of an armed robbery way back when I first started with Crimestoppers. And I knew back then the fear, but that person didn't live next to me, but they had everything about me, and I had a brand new baby. So I mean, I understood that they could show up on my doorstep at any time. And no, I don't have law enforcement living on my doorstep, you know. So I get that fear. But what I also understand, the human side of this, is that there's a victim. You know, you're a victim. You can stay in that victim cycle and do nothing but be fearful for the rest of your life, or you can fight back. And fighting back, one way to do that is to speak up.
Now I hear you saying that, and it sounds effective to me.
Right.
I'm moved by that speech. Right. Why don't we see that speech on television and in social media? Why don't we see that speech from young people?
Right. We need to, and we need to have there was a group, the Aspen Challenge, that happened and there were several groups who wanted to do stuff against, you know, against violence. And that, looking at those groups of young people who are saying enough is enough. The mothers, you know, we try to partner with the moms, and we do the National Victims Crimes Week, and we do videos and things like that, and they are saying the same thing. And you're right, it needs to spread throughout all of the community. Even us who are in a neighborhood, you may not have had a homicide in your neighborhood, but you certainly have had your car broken into, you had car theft. I mean, that's also attacking your quality of life. We all need to stand up with that same message that you are my neighbor. I am responsible for you. I don't just live in a bubble. You know, and it's back to the old days when you know, couldn't walk down the street and everybody saw what you were doing, and they told you, it's the same thing. As we've got to build that village back. So
how do we do that? I know one way that Crimestoppers works to find the perpetrators or the criminal who's responsible for a crime is to offer incentives for calling in a tip.
Right.
And that's what, $2,500?
It depends. It could be $5,000.
It could be $5,000.
We have a new reward. We have a reward we did last year. We're really re-announcing it for the summer, a gun crime reward. So you are going to tell me Darlene committed this crime, and hey, she's a felon with a firearm. She's got the gun in her car. NOPD or whatever law enforcement agency, stop her, arrest her for being a felon with a firearm, now your reward has doubled.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So we're going to take that gun, and ATF's going to test it. On every other crime that gun hits on, you get another couple $100. You can go up to $3,000 for a gun crime. Now, that's not a homicide. If it's a homicide, there's more. But just getting the weapon is such a great part of the for the evidence trail. So that's one of the things that we're doing. We're trying to add an added value to the fact that you may not want to give up Darlene, but give up her gun. Let's start the chain. So it's looking at those other ways to kind of influence people where they're a little bit more comfortable to tell. The other thing with that is on older cold cases. We do a lot on cold cases.
So the cold cases, I think back on the young lady who was killed on the interstate some years ago on New Orleans East, in New Orleans East. And I say New Orleans East because I used to live in that community, and so I'm still invested in it because I have friends there.
Sure.
And I was concerned that they never turned up any motive or suspects in that case.
No, so many of the ones.
So how many cold cases are you currently challenged by?
We get calls probably 3 times a week on please do something.
3 times a week?
On please air something. Please put some information out about my son or my daughter's case. I like to use the phrase, "There really isn't a cold case for Crimestoppers." We never give up. Okay, so we're going to have any case that's brought to us, we're going to try to help in. I have no clue how many open homicide cases. We're just looking at homicide cases there are just in the city. But we're getting ready to do an announcement next week for a case that's about 10 years old from St. John Parish that we worked with the family then. They're getting information, people are telling them, we're going to reissue that information. But for folks, when they feel like it's been forgotten, that's the first hurdle that we're trying to overcome. It's not forgotten. Law enforcement, obviously, there's a challenge with just the number of new cases that are flowing in to be able to focus a great deal of efforts on the old cases. But that's where we all come into. The more information we feed into law enforcement, the quicker that investigation can happen. So, for families, they need to feel like they're supported. And of course, the reward money that we offer is still there, so that other incentive is still there, besides the fact that their information's out in the news again. So
how does that incentive program work? So I call Crimestoppers with a tip, and that tip leads to an arrest. So how am I paid? Right.
So first off, on any felony crime, felony crime of violence, we put up our money. So you don't, as a victim, have to put up anything. And they don't know we have it. It's there. Law enforcement has to promote that, or the media. Information comes in if there's an arrest, which means law enforcement gets every piece of information we receive. If an arrest comes in, they have to tell us, yes, I used the tip to help corroborate to get this arrest. Then we actually pay out those funds to that one tipster, or it could be 2, it could be split, through a tip number. So we're never asking you who you are. We're not like some agencies where if you're a CI, you have to put your social security number down. Okay? We don't do that. I don't want to know who you are. We don't capture that information. And it's paid out in cash at a bank. So it's a bank that we set up for you, and on a certain date and time, and you go through a drive-up, put down on a piece of paper your number, you drive away with cash.
Really?
Crazy, simple, it works, and nobody knows unless you tell somebody it's happening.
So that's how it's done. And you don't have to, the person doesn't have to be convicted in order for you to get paid, or
no,
you don't
it's an
have
arrest. On a homicide, we will split your reward, half on arrest, half on indictment. We don't go through conviction because would be still sitting here, in many instances. So the process is too long. But arrest is really how it's been done through most Crimestoppers across the United States. So it's quick. It could happen in a couple of days, particularly with the one of fugitives.
How successful have you been over the years as it relates to solving cases as a result of a tip?
Well, I can tell you, there's a lot of information that we don't ever get back from law enforcement. So my #1 complaint over all these years is it's very tough to get the responses back at times through different agencies. But we have paid out, we've helped solve like 18,000 felonies since that I've been involved with the organization. So I see it's working. Rewards earned typically for a year goes between 80 to 120,000 earned, but not everybody picks up their money, which is another change that I've seen. In the beginning, when I first started, oh my God, 99% of the folks were, where's my money? I want my money. Now,
really?
And that's a trend nationally too, that not everybody's.
Why?
No one seems to know, Norman. I mean, it's like, I like to think that people are just tired of crime and wanting to do the right thing, and they're giving the information, but yeah.
That leads to my next question. Have the calls increased or decreased as a result of what we're seeing now? So
over COVID, we saw a decrease in the call volume, not only here, but in other places with Crimestopper programs. We're seeing an increase trickling up now, but it's not as high as it was before the COVID incidences. You know, it was starting to decline a little bit right before COVID. And folks are, you know, for us, we were a hotline. Now most of our calls are coming in not as calls, they come in over as an app, like our students strictly as an app, or through our website.
So what is the concern now about a potential uptick in crime now that school's out?
Well, historically, we've usually seen crime increase over the summer months. And I know that in New Orleans, we're seeing a decrease in some instances, and, you know, in the murder rate and in the shooting rate, which is great, and carjacking rate. I know car theft was up. But for kids, it just seems like there's a lot of time and energy out on the streets. And when you're looking at groups getting into battles, turf battles over silly things or whatever, or even drugs, you know, increases in drugs and drug sales, you do see a trending up of tips. And for us, I mean, one of the things that we're doing with our school program is we're letting the school systems that are participating with us, we will continue to take tips over the summer, because those type of tips are typically more law enforcement related. So we want to let kids know that, you know, if you're used to using the Safe Schools Louisiana app, if you send in information, we're going to focus on that. We're going to vet it. We're going to try to help you with that. And as far as the adult community, the Crimestoppers number, everybody knows, the 822-1111. We do see an increase. We're seeing an increase in weapons, which is, yes, by weapons that people are seeing sales, or people, looks like they're having weapon, you know, sales or transactions happening in the neighborhoods. We're getting information on social media about the Glock switches. So all of that, we're excited that we're able to work with the ATF on to help kind of bridge all the intelligence together to be able to send it to an agency, whether it would be them or NOPD or whatever, to kind of do the investigation side.
Glock switches, tell me about that.
I'm not the expert there, but that's when folks
But you're saying you're getting an increase.
We're getting tips on, these people are selling these on the internet. You can go ahead and look and see, it has it on their Facebook page. It says if you want to purchase this, or on Instagram. And it's leading to the individuals actually doing these, let's say, under the table sales. And those are very dangerous. And
so that explains somewhat why we see these youngsters. I mean, as young as 12 years old, showing up on the street with these semi-automatic weapons. Semi-automatic weapons.
And yes, and when we look at, I know with all the legislation that's happened about permits, and, you know, I'm not going to go there with any of that, but the kids can get a gun easier than we can get a gallon of gas. You know, so. And they know about these things. So, I mean, I think for us, it's constantly giving them the opportunity to not choose that path. Is how we're going to win.
So with the proliferation of guns, I'm surprised that Crimestoppers hasn't taken a position on that. What is the...
Well,
what's the thinking there?
For us, I mean, our position is to try to offer money when it's a crime gun. So we're not going to be, talk about the permits or non-permits or whatever. We're going to look at, once a gun is used in an action of a crime, how can we intervene? Do we give more money? How do we encourage folks to give us that information? Domestic violence. I mean, I'm very concerned about the number of women who are being victimized and killed. So how can we make sure that women know to let us know the information on the forefront, when it could be a preventative type episode instead of the resulting of somebody's now been shot. So tell us, where's the weapons? You know this person's not supposed to have a weapon. Where are they? Help us to be able to get that so that we can charge this person who is illegally in possession and dangerous because they're in possession of that weapon in their history.
What about 3D printed guns? Are you getting reports on
We're
those?
not. We're not dealing with that, but absolutely. I know that probably kids can tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
And you should interview with the ATF. They have some interesting facts on that.
That's a good suggestion. I think we'll have them on the program to really get down. But I really wanted to ask you something more specific about guns. Is it likely that Crimestoppers that will ever take a position on just getting guns off the street, saying that it's a bad thing and we need to ban assault weapons? There's no need to have them, because they're obviously people killers, and you don't go hunting Bambi with an AK, 47.
Right. So for my years with the organization, we tried to stay non-political. So whether we will ever take a stance in that instance, I'm not sure. How they would feel. Obviously,
I'm just,
the use of guns.
I'm curious
is a
about
concern.
why that would be a political issue.
Right.
When you think about that, it's just a humanism issue. Because you're talking about matters of life and death, and sometimes we just, we kind of diminish everything to, politics when it really ought to be about humanity.
No, it is about humanity, and on our end, we had a discussion yesterday on our board meeting. Was okay. So if we're getting this information that there is a automatic, whatever. There's a firearm. There's shots fired, etc. We need an immediate response.
Mm-hmm.
So we're breaking down the steps and saying, well, how do we make sure that we have an immediate response? Who are we going to? And that's the discussion we're having with local law enforcement. What is the best way to help our caller? And in some instances, if they're calling me, we always say we're not an emergency number, but that doesn't stop folks from calling us, right? So just like with an active suicide threat, what's the best way for me to intervene as the Crime Stopper segment of this, in making sure that we can backfill wherever it is on law enforcement side? And we hear too many times how we call 911 and we don't have a response. We can't get an ambulance, whatever that might be. And that is a big part of our concern, because we feel responsible.
So you're broadening the framework of the kind of thinking you're doing, and about the kind of structure that you're offering to solve the crime issue. It's no longer just here's a number to call.
Oh, absolutely
but these are resources that are available to you.
Definitely. We're much more holistic than I think people realize. And that's been my focus my entire time, because it's not, you cannot solve it in just the tip of the bottle. You have to have the whole bottle and fill it with the juice, right? And when we talk about lack of manpower, that has a direct effect on what Crime Stoppers does. So
really?
Absolutely. And how many tips do we get where people are saying, I'm seeing something happening in my neighborhood?
Mm-hmm.
All the people who we tell to call in, they're good stewards of their neighborhood. But they get tired of calling me saying, I reported this person selling drugs 10 times. I reported this, the weapons I see coming and going out of cars. If we don't have enough manpower to do surveillance, because a lot of that is surveillance.
Sure.
You can call, by luck, pull up.
Yeah.
So it has an absolute negative effect on the people's concerns about, are they being heard? Is anybody following up? The same side of that is on our tips. We need to have a response back on our tips. If you don't tell me you used the tip and it went towards an arrest, I can't pay and reward my tipster. So all of that is a manpower, man-hour issue. And I think what gets lost in the cycle of all of this discussion is the fact that what we develop for you, law enforcement, is criminal intelligence. We're the vehicle people can use, and you need that intelligence to do all of your work. So you're constantly asking for people to help you. Let's make sure when we get the information, we're helping them. So it's a delicate balance.
Yeah. So how is that balance working? As we sit here and discuss the situation, how is that balance working?
Right. Well, I've been really encouraged with the superintendent, Superintendent Woodfork, really trying to think out of the box and finding other sources of bodies to place in the areas where we're seeing the needs. And I know we were talking very specifically last week about the gun crimes and the gun tips, and making sure that there's, what team is out there that could take that on. I mean, we can only, if you only have 10 people, how do we keep stretching 10, right?
Yeah.
Like the Bible, we need to stretch everything, all those loaves and fishes. Is there a way that we can have civilians step in and help? Is there something that my agency, through my civilians, could help on? Can we fund a civilian position? I mean, I can't do a commissioned officer, obviously, but can I fund a civilian position to help be an intermediary? And that's the kind of conversations that we're having. And of course, she's open to that. In New Orleans, of course, the sheriff's the same way. It's just thinking, how do we do things differently? Like, I sit in a building that has the Criminal Intelligence Center for the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office, and they do a great job. And part of that conversation came up, though I haven't mentioned that to the sheriff, but I mean, is there something that we could do differently with some of the folks that sit up there? I don't know, but it's really thinking out of the box, because again, when I first started, you had, I don't know, 2,000 officers, and we had manpower was not the issue.
Yeah.
It was the relationships with things happening on the streets. Now we have to have that manpower issue.
Now we
solved.
have to, I think you used the word holistic. I think all of us collectively need to be more holistic.
Absolutely.
We're going to have to think differently. It's not it's not just go out there and and put a muzzle on crime. You're going to have to start outsmarting the criminal element.
We have to hold people who are buying stolen goods accountable. Our tip came in and helped with the recent theft of all the steel beams. But again, and that person just happened to be paying attention and who made that tip. Thank God, right? But holding all the pieces of the puzzle accountable. And I'm going back to the first gentleman who talked about education. The good thing with that is the other positive thing I'm seeing is that there has been more money put towards public safety in schools because of all the shootings. And actually, we just had Senate Bill 207 passed, and they're going to start a school safety center under GOSEP, Governor's Homeland Security. But they're realizing that as a state, we need to be the leaders in making sure that our school systems have those simple things in place, not just an anonymous reporting system, but all of the education that they need to know how to secure their school environment. So that's a positive. That wasn't there when I first started trying to tell people there was a school shooting at John McDonough High School. We helped solve that case. That's how I started the school program back in the day. I know most of you people are too young to know that, but that
myself included, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, it's been great talking to you, and I hope law enforcement collectively takes full advantage of the thinking that you're doing,
thank you,
and the resources that you have to offer them.
Yes, and the community too.
Yeah, and the
Just
community.
know that we're here for them. It's.
And we hope to have you back again.
Thank you, Norman.
All right. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
We would again like to thank our guest, Crimestoppers GNO President and CEO Darlene Costanza, for joining us on the program this evening. And we will return next month with more city leaders, executives, local business owners, and protectors of our city committed to making a positive change in our community. I'm Norman Robinson, and we will see you next time on NOLA Crime Crisis.